And let's get to the big news of the day before we attack your favorite conference. So the SEC has said, okay, we're going to do it. We're going to 9 games. And there's been much internal debate, I'm sure, within those boardrooms in the SEC, because it's been pretty obvious in observing this situation that there have been factions within the SEC that just believe, hey, this conference is so strong, we cannot go to 9 games. The 8 games is enough. And then other factions of the conference that see that 9 games is the way to go for a number of reasons. So your initial thoughts about the move from the SEC?
Yeah, I mean, it sure is interesting with the timing of coming right on the heels of the leak or, media report, whatever you want to call it, getting out there about the Big Ten pushing some bigger playoff proposals, 24, 28 teams. I think Ross Dellinger even reported at one point in there that the SEC had at one point kicked around the idea of like 32 teams, and this would be, 7, 7, 5, a ton of auto bids everywhere. So, I mean, it leads me to believe that the SEC has sold itself on either they put their thumb on the scale enough with the changes that they made this year to what's happening with strength of schedule, where they feel like, hey, no matter what format we move to, if it's going to be 5+11 or whatever it might be, will be taken care of because they're going to value strength of schedule enough, which, I mean, again, I'm not saying I agree with their stance that it wasn't taken into consideration enough last year, but clearly the SEC thought that it was not. And they didn't get this overly special preferential treatment that they have gotten every year for the last couple of decades. But it makes you feel like they must be pretty content with where they're at with either that or thinking, well, we'll just go to one of these monster proposals where we know that we'll get 7 teams in every year and it's not really going to matter all that much, because that was the whole deal, right? Like, we don't want to go to 9 games because we don't want to give up a competitive advantage there. We think we play a tougher conference schedule. So why would we do that for you? Of course, there's a financial incentive. I mean, I know the reporting around that has been, it could be up to $5 million per team per year to do this extra game. So it will certainly make dollars and cents, but I think the SEC wanted to make sure that it would make sense in terms of how many teams they'd be getting in the playoff every single year.
Yeah, when we look at the format of the SEC schedules, we obviously know that there are 4 teams in the old SEC Eastern Division that play those rivalry matchups on the final weekend of the season against the ACC. I've heard out of the Clemson and South Carolina camps that they in no way want to give up that game. And I would expect Louisville, Kentucky, Georgia, Georgia Tech, and the other one, Florida State, to remain. Therefore, some of those teams, as you well know, on occasion choose not to schedule another difficult game, but on many occasions they do. They double up and they schedule somebody else that's a difficult opponent. Florida, of course, going after Miami the last 2 years with a home and home is one instance. And so I would expect that would be a situation where, for the college football fan, less big non-conference games, because those SEC schools are going to be reluctant to schedule a second difficult non-conference game.
Yeah, probably so. And I mean, as I'm hearing you say that, I'm like, man, I hope that this isn't something that leads to losing your Clemson, South Carolina, Florida States of the world, because like we've just lost way too much of that in college football. I mean, I'm a guy from Big 12 country, losing things like Kansas, Missouri, Texas A&M, all of these rivalries that have gone away. Obviously, Texas and Texas A&M went away for a long time because of conference realignment is just ripping away at the soul of the sport. So, yeah, I do tend to agree with you. You probably will, though, overall see a little bit less in terms of the, like, Texas, Ohio State may not see quite as much of that moving forward. Although, I guess between SEC and Big Ten, there was talk at one point of getting together with a scheduling sort of alliance. I think that'll depend on, I mean, if they go to a playoff format that has 7 auto bids for the Big Ten and the SEC, I think then it's going to revert, and you might actually see way more of that than you did before between the SEC and the Big Ten, because they'll be like, well, screw it, it doesn't matter. We're going to get 7 teams in, so we might as well schedule each other. So for now, well, it's still up in the air, and while the SEC may still ultimately want a 5+11 sort of format, yeah, in this kind of holding pattern period, I think you're right. You may see less of that.
I'm assuming once we get to the chat that our Big Ten contingent will be happy that the SEC is finally gone to a 9-game schedule in particular, not saying that the Big 12 doesn't have a stake in this, or the ACC, which obviously is still at 17 teams in the conference. I'm hearing all sorts of things about the likelihood of that happening, or logistically, mathematically, whether it even can be pulled off going to a 9-game schedule with 17 teams. But what I'm getting at here, John, is that we have had a strange alliance, but also battleground between the SEC and the Big Ten that has built up here since we've gone to this 12-team college football playoff and the new media deals and everything. So they're in each of their the opposite corners on one hand, but they built this alliance on the other hand. So we knew weeks ago that Greg Sankey was pushing 5+11. Tony Petitti was pushing this 4-4-2-2 on down the line model, 1-3 model. And my thought was, okay, neither one of these commissioners want to be on record and, have their stance defeated and see that played out publicly. So I wonder if this is a situation where Greg Sankey gives in here with a 9-game schedule. Tony Petitti is going to say, okay, you get your way. We'll give back with this 5-11 model.
Interesting thought. I mean, I definitely think there could be something to that. I know that they've been talking lately because the reporting around the 24-28 team proposal was that it had gotten to the SEC. It was like circulating through the SEC. So there had been some level of conversation between the two on that, kind of passing the baton off on that idea. It is weird though. I mean, they seem to be really arm in arm for a long time, and everybody assumed that the 4-4-2-2 playoff was going to pass because they've just been agreeing on everything, and that seemed like a pretty good deal for them, and that they would just force it through. I think it was, really the Big 12 and ACC throwing in a poison pill to shake up the apple cart with the 5+11, because that's, again, the reporting tells you that's where it came from, was from the Big 12 and ACC side of things. They knew it would appeal to the SEC coaches who didn't want the extra playing games at the end of the year to be more wear and tear, especially if you're going to expand the playoff and you're talking about some of the big guns in the SEC having to play like 16, 17 games. They didn't like the idea of any of that. And in throwing that in there and getting the SEC on board with something else, you actually created some legitimate tension between the Big Ten and the SEC. And frankly, for everybody else, I come from Big 12 country. The worst thing in the world for people in the Big 12 or the ACC or the Group of Six is the Big Ten and the SEC pulling in the same direction. The more that you can get them a little bit divided, the less fluidly and quickly everything is going to get away. I would tell you, for the worst, just for the worst in general for the sport, for the sake of the sport, they seem on this torrid pace to really tear apart a lot of what we really love about college football and what makes it great. And I think things that'll have really long-term ramifications even for the Big Ten and the SEC. So I thought that was almost kind of a brilliant move by the Big 12 and the ACC to introduce that, to get these guys butting heads a little bit. And I don't know. Some of it too is just like Petitti. It seems so television driven. You can just draw a straight line. They always say follow the money. I mean, you can just draw this straight back to TV being in Tony Petitti's back pocket, or really actually Tony Petitti being in TV's pocket. Like, they're the ones kind of pulling the strings. And this is a guy who came from the TV and professional sports world. And that's why you've seen your mark take some shots. Like, hey, we're not the NFL. Just all feels like such an NFL thing the Big Ten is pushing for. Seems very Fox motivated. Seems very, hey, we went out and added all these extra teams, so now we're a bloated conference motivated. Just things that I don't think are very good for the sport. If you can't tell, I don't have a super high opinion right now on Tony Petitti, but I mean, look, Greg Sankey's done plenty of damage himself. So yeah, it'll be very interesting to see what the relationship is going to be like between these guys moving forward now.
My defense for them, John, would be that they're hired to work for their conference, for the best interest of their conference, not for college football. And that's sad. That's not a good thing. And I agree with you. I'm a purist. I'm a traditionalist. I would love to see us roll the years back 20 or 25. But Greg Sankey, Tony Petitti, they are employed by their respective conferences to do what's best for their conferences, and not the whole of college football. I think I'm going back to Tony Petiti's initial comments when he was named commissioner of the Big Ten. And he said, John, you may remember, we are going to change the schedule in the Big Ten. We are going to focus on our best brands, our biggest brands, playing meaningful games in late October and throughout November. Then in the next sentence, he said, and our other goal is to get as many Big Ten teams into the college football playoff as possible. And I thought, well, those compete against each other. That's not going to happen. Then I quickly thought, well, that's leading us to a different version of the college football playoff where he's going to get his way. And we see it with these various models. The other thing I think of is that we've trusted this committee for 11 years. And I don't like the committee. I don't like the idea of a committee, not those particular members of the committee do I have an issue with. But I've got to admit, through 11 seasons, albeit the Florida State decision was something that could be debated forever, and I do believe that they earned a spot and should have been given a playoff spot in 2023. They've made other tie-breaking type decisions between 4 and 5 that had to be made, but they've made no egregious errors, at least in my perspective. And here we are, not trusting them to continue this through and having to slot this thing with this 4-4-2-2-3 and basically assuming that 2 conferences are twice as good as 2 other conferences before we even play a down of football.
Yeah, look, I mean, first of all, I will say I'm with you on, hey, these guys are just trying to make decisions in the best interest of their conferences. I think it's, we just have a really bad power vacuum that was kind of sucked up by these 2 guys leading these 2 conferences. So I totally understand that. It's just hard not to be really upset with the irreversible damage that I think is being done with a lot of this. So where were you going with this? Apologies. I got a little sidetracked.
My question turned into about 4, John. So no reason to apologize because I went a number of ways there, but just basically, I guess I'll take it this way in terms of the models, what you believe to be the best one on the table for where we appear to be headed. And that would be, I believe, 16 temes, despite this crazy 20.
That's right. You were talking about the committee. Okay. Yes,
yeah, I like and the committee doing its job. Yeah.
So I like the point that you make on that because I don't really understand. I mean, I do. Look, I understand what happened. The SEC for the first time in 15 to 20 years did not get incredibly over the top preferential treatment. I still would tell you they got preferential treatment because what other league in the country outside of maybe the Big Ten is getting 3-loss Alabama, 3-loss Ole Miss, and 3-loss South Carolina as heavy consideration for the playoff as they did? I mean, that is them looking at strength of schedule in the SEC and giving a nod there that they were even close with the losses that they had at 9-3. But because the SEC, they kind of play the role of like a spoiled child a little bit. You didn't get the over-the-top treatment that you get every year, so they want to change things. But I'm with you. It's like the committee. What has the committee done to look back just 1 year. Ask Florida State how the committee typically treats the SEC versus everybody else. Like, they get the preferential treatment from the committee. It's such a weird tirade that they seem to be on right now to go after the committee. I just don't really understand it. I mean, the Big Ten seems to be kind of in line with that too. Like, hey, yeah, we don't want people to be handling this. Really, the only other thing I would point out was the first year of the playoff. I believe that was the first year. Right? Was it 14? Maybe it was the second year of the playoff when you had TCU and Baylor at the end of the year and the Big 12, the one true champion meme. They did not pick a champion between the two, but TCU went from third, beat Iowa State by 50, and then dropped to sixth. Then they were out, and Ohio State was in the field. I mean, that's the only other time I would certainly argue that they made the wrong decision. I don't care what happened once Ohio State was in the playoff, but they have generally, I think, been okay. And they have certainly been deferential to the Big Ten and the SEC, the brands that they really care about. So it's such a weird tangent to go off on here. My stance as far as, what do I think is best? Look, I think what's best for college football would be to go back to the BCS, like keep the regular season important. It's just like all these things that we're doing now with the playoff and trying to expand it more and more, which again is about TV and money and people like Tony Petitti driving that, take us away from the thing that makes college football unique and special and great, which is the regular season. I mean, think about 15 years ago, like the tension in the regular season. You lose one regular season game, that can be your season. Like you have no margin for error. And that's what made college football so awesome and so unique and so different. And I know, lots of people had beef with the BCS at times, but I think looking back on it now, if we could just put that genie back in the bottle and go back to the BCS, we'd be so much better off for where the sport is. I don't like expanding. Like, here's what I would say: the best for the sport right now, stay at 12. We've been there for 1 year. Stay at 12. Keep it there. Don't expand it. Like, just because this isn't as good as what we have doesn't mean we need to just make it worse for short-term cash grabs. So that would be my answer. I guess beyond that, I mean, I think from a Big 12 perspective, everybody knows the deal. They don't want to and can't really sign anything other than the 5+11 because you don't want to just codify. You don't want to sign your own name on the dotted line that says, hey, we're half of, or I think it's like 71% if you're doing 5 auto bids versus 7 auto bids. We're not less than these two other conferences. They're really in a position where you can't do that for a number of reasons, mainly just the message that it sends to everybody. So I guess by default, that kind of puts me at 5+11. But again, I don't want to expand. I don't think, like, what is the problem with where we're even at right now? It just, Petitti seems to be trying to fix a problem that does not exist with trying to expand this even more.
You can catch John Kurtz right here on YouTube. And John, since we got you for 3 or 4 minutes, I want to switch. We could obviously slice this up for hours in regards to the playoff, but I want to switch to your conference. And before I get to Iowa State and Kansas State real quick, it's funny that we're talking schedules because I do not understand, with everything that Brett Yormark has done, which I think he's an excellent commissioner, especially for the Big 12. He's an excellent commissioner. This scheduling, I hear that Kansas State and Iowa State, which is a game that I believe that should be protected. When you look at the scheduling in the Big 12, it just looks like they just are throwing stuff at the wall, and they're not protecting their core of rivalries from the old guard of the Big 12, and just, it seems a bit haphazard to me.
Yeah, Baylor, Texas Tech, I think, is another one of those that fans have been really upset about. You hit on it's a sore spot with a lot of people across the league. The only thing I will say, kind of in defense, one, I'm just someone who I have not spent as much time getting upset about that as some, but as it gets closer, like the K-State Iowa State thing, as I'm peeking ahead as a K-State guy and looking through that schedule, it is like, man, okay, you've lost. Missouri's out of the conference. Nebraska was the rivalry I grew up with as a K-State fan, child of the 90s and early 2000s. Like, that's gone. You're not going to have Iowa State. Like, all these teams that you played for years and years not being on the schedule. It does suck. It's just when you get these bloated conferences, man, you start getting up to 16 and 18. It is really hard to make everybody happy and satisfy everybody. I can tell you, I mean, the Big 12 is certainly well aware of the blowback that they've had on some of these. And I think there's a shot that it could get revisited. But I think a lot of it is they're just sort of like, guys, like, we have too many teams in the conference, and that's, yes, their own fault, but they're obviously being reactionary to what's happened in realignment before them. So it kind of, I hate to take everything back to the same points I'm making, but we're just in such a dumb place with the general structure of the sport right now that you're going to have some of these issues. As far as like playing in Ireland, I mean, that's another thing that, K-State fans are not thrilled with that in a lot of ways because you lose a home game. K-State's lost 4 or 5 now to Iowa State, and you're taking a home game and putting it in Ireland, and now you got to play them the first game of the season, like in a crucial year for both teams. But it's money. Like, they need money. K-State's getting a payday out of it, and in this revenue-sharing era, they need all the money they can get. And plus, I think for the Big 12 looks at it like, hey, when are we going to get 5 million people to watch one of our games? And that was the number for Florida State, Georgia Tech last year, was 5 million in the Ireland game. So you'd figure you're probably going to be in that ballpark, and you want to take that publicity. They're doing it next year with TCU playing in Ireland. So I think they are doing some things to try and just maximize eyeballs on a game as much as they possibly can. But I won't shield them from all criticism when it comes to the scheduling stuff. Because, yeah, I mean, as a league, you would definitely want K-State, Iowa State right now. Two of the better programs in the league, one of the more heated rivalries that's developed recently. That's something that in an ideal world, you would definitely want it being played every year for sure.
Yeah, so your explanation makes total sense, John, but I would flip it around to say, with so many nondescript games on the schedule, why would you not protect the old guard games when you've got UCF playing Utah and Cincinnati and Arizona State? Just games that I'm good with. They're interesting. They're teams that have never played before or rarely, but that should not be the driving force of your league. Those kind of games. It's just. Yeah, I would think it would be easy to implement a schedule where you protect the 8 to 12 games that should definitely be played.
Yeah, I mean, I can't really argue that. And again, because it's like I'm kind of like you, man. I'm more like a traditionalist, and it's like, yeah, you had all these Big 8 schools, or even like the Hateful Eight. You know, if you want to extend that out to like West Virginia and TCU, who were in the conference when everything fell apart with Texas and Oklahoma. They had been in long enough to develop some rivalries with teams. As much as you can keep those teams playing together, you really want to. I'm sure some of it probably is like, yeah, hey, we don't want to be unfair to the new members, but yeah, like, at a certain point, you got to do what you got to do to preserve some of that. Probably so. Yeah.
Iowa State, Kansas State coming up, 3.5-point favorite. I believe Kansas State is, this is almost a coin flip kind of game. And Iowa State had a great run, of course, last year. And Kansas State, with all the topsy-turvy nature of the standings in the Big 12, K-State seems to be the one constant that they're always going to be in it and a contender. Do you have a particular lean in this one?
Yeah, I've been taking a lot of crap from my K-State fan contingent here lately. I am a K-State guy. My concern here, and look, Iowa State's had K-State's number for one. They've won 4 of the last 5. Before that, this was a series K-State completely dominated. They had really kind of like a cat, playing with a mouse or something, just sort of tortured Iowa State over and over again. And then Matt Campbell finally flipped the script. And over the last 5 years, the only time K-State's won this game was a 1-point win in 2022. And that was a Big 12 champion K-State team over a 4-win Iowa State team. So they have had a heck of a time beating Matt Campbell lately. I think there are question marks on both sides for sure. Like Iowa State lost 2 of the best receivers you're going to find in college football. Jaden Higgins, Jalen Noel, who are both now Houston Texans, taken in the 2nd and 3rd round. That was an insane receiving core that they had. So what does Rocco Becht, who's established himself as one of the better quarterbacks in the country, what does he look like now without those 2 guys on offense? They just relied on being super explosive with them. Their running game was pretty pedestrian last year. So what happens now? They have some nice transfers, Chase Soul, Xavier Townsend. We'll get to find out, what they look like. But that is, I think, a massive question mark. Iowa State's defense probably needs to be a little better against the run than they were last year, but I expect them to be. John Heacock, one of the best defensive coordinators in college football. And for K-State, it's like, hey, flashes of brilliance last year, but what this season will come down to is, can Avery Johnson take those flashes of brilliance and turn it into more consistency at quarterback? And that is the million-dollar question, I think, for this team. But there are holes. They've got a lot of new pieces on the offensive line, a lot of talent coming in, but a lot of new pieces on the offensive line, new offensive coordinator, new offensive line coach this year. And I think the real thing to watch out for, the thing that scares me the most as a K-State guy, is what happens on the back end of the K-State secondary, because they lost 2 pros in Marquise Siegel and Jacob Parrish last year. They've got 1 returner, BJ Payne, like 1 returning starter, BJ Payne back there at safety. 2 new corners, Gunnar Maldonado from Arizona, who's a really good player, great transfer. He's probably going to be on kind of a pitch count. I don't think he's fully healthy, so he'll play some, but they're going to have to use a true freshman at safety quite a bit, Logan Bartley, in that game. So I have some concerns about what Rocco Becht and that Iowa State offense will be able to do. With K-State breaking, I think a secondary that could be good by the end of the year. They certainly have talent, but this is where you don't like that matchup coming right out of the gate. You'd rather have this be a game against North Dakota, which is who they play next week. So my lean has been actually slight lean to Iowa State. Some of that, frankly, is just, K-State's Chris Kleiman needs to go beat Matt Campbell again to make me believe in that happening. So with all these variables, traveling to Ireland, first game of the year, too much uncertainty for me to feel great about K-State winning the game. So I'm leaning Cyclones right now.
John Kurtz is right here on YouTube. Go check out his channel, Talking Big 12 and the entirety of college football. John, we appreciate you stopping by, sir.
Yeah, anytime. Had fun.